I never imagined I'd be the guy to get blindsided like this. My name's Mike, and until a few months ago, I thought my life was pretty solid. You know, the kind of life you see in commercials. I've been married to Hannah for nearly 10 years. We met back in college and just clicked. She's smart, funny, and always had this adventurous side that kept things exciting. We weren't rich, but we made enough to live comfortably. We'd have the occasional fight, sure, but nothing major. Or so I thought. Looking back, maybe there were signs. She started working late more often, but hey, she's always been ambitious. I never questioned it. I'd make dinner and we'd eat together when she got home. I'd ask about her day, and she'd give me the usual rundown. Nothing unusual, nothing to raise any red flags. Then one night, she didn't come home at all. She sent a text around 11 p.m. saying she was staying at a friend's place because they'd had a few drinks after work. I didn't think much of it at first, but then it started happening more often. The texts, the late nights, the vague excuses. I tried to talk to her, ask if something was wrong, but she just brushed it off, saying she was stressed at work. One night, she came home late again, but this time something was different. I could feel it in the air. She was quieter, distant. I watched her move around the house like she was just going through the motions, avoiding eye contact. My gut told me something was up, but I didn't push it. I didn't want to believe that my wife, my partner for all these years, could be hiding something from me. Then, I found the messages. It was a Saturday afternoon, and she was out shopping. Her phone was on the kitchen counter, buzzing with a notification. I glanced at it and saw a name I didn't recognize. Tom. Curiosity got the best of me, and I unlocked her phone. What I saw shattered me. They were talking about their last night together, the way she described things, the way she talked to him. It wasn't just physical. There was an emotional connection there, something I hadn't seen from her in months. She was telling him things she hadn't told me in ages. My heart raced as I scrolled through more of their conversations. There were pictures, intimate moments. It wasn't just a fling. This had been going on for a while. I remember just standing there in shock, staring at the screen, trying to make sense of it all. How could she do this to me? How could she betray everything we'd built together? My hands were shaking, and I felt this surge of anger, hurt, and betrayal. I wanted to confront her right then and there, but I knew I needed to stay calm. When she got home that evening, I didn't say a word. I couldn't. I just watched her, trying to see her the way I had before. But everything had changed. She wasn't the same person anymore. Or maybe she was, and I had just been blind to it all along. I spent the next few days in a daze, going through the motions of daily life while trying to figure out what to do. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. My mind was racing with thoughts of revenge, of making her feel the same pain she had inflicted on me. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the answer. Then, one day, I decided enough was enough. I confronted her. I waited until she was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. I walked up to her, stood there for a moment, and then just said it. I know. She looked up at me, confused at first, but then realization dawned on her face. She knew what I meant. Her eyes widened, and she dropped her phone onto the couch, staring at me with this panicked expression. What do you mean?" she stammered, but I wasn't buying it. "I know about Tom," I said, my voice cold and steady. "I know about everything." For a second, she just sat there, frozen. Then the tears started. She tried to explain, to justify, to blame it on stress and loneliness. But I wasn't having any of it. I told her I didn't want to hear her excuses. I didn't want to hear anything from her, actually. I packed a bag that night and left. I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do. I just knew I couldn't stay in that house, not with her, not after everything she'd done. For the next few weeks, I crashed on a friend's couch, trying to figure out my next move. I could have filed for divorce right then and there, but I wanted to do something more. I wanted to make sure she understood the depth of the pain she caused me. That's when I came up with my plan. I decided to hit her where it hurt the most, her reputation. You see, Hannah had always been the perfect wife in our social circle. She was well-liked, respected, the kind of person people looked up to. But that was all a facade, and I was about to tear it down. I started by gathering evidence, screenshots of the messages, the pictures, everything. Then, I waited for the right moment. Our 10-year anniversary was coming up, and she had been planning this big party with all our friends and family. It was supposed to be a celebration of our love, of our perfect marriage. The night of the party, I walked in like nothing was wrong. I greeted people, smiled, made small talk. But inside, I was seething. When it was time for speeches, Hannah stood up and started talking about how grateful she was for the last 10 years, how much she loved me, how she couldn't wait for the next 10. That's when I took the microphone. I stood in front of everyone, looked her in the eyes, and said, "I'm glad you're so grateful, Hannah, but maybe you should tell everyone about Tom." The room went silent. You could hear a pin drop. Hannah's face went pale, and she started to stammer, trying to come up with some kind of excuse, but it was too late. I pulled out my phone and started showing the messages, the pictures, everything. People were shocked. Some gasped, others just stared in disbelief. Hannah ran out of the room, but I didn't care. I had made my point. I had exposed her for who she really was. I left the party after that, feeling this strange mix of satisfaction and emptiness. I had done what I set out to do, but it didn't make me feel any better. If anything, it made me realize just how broken I had become. A few days later, I filed for divorce. I didn't want to drag it out or make it any more painful than it already was. I just wanted to move on. But even now, months later, I still think about her. I still wonder if there was something I could have done differently. But then I remind myself that she made her choices. She's the one who destroyed our marriage, not me. Now, I'm just trying to rebuild my life, piece by piece. It's not easy, but I'm getting there. And maybe one day I'll be able to look back on all of this and see it as a lesson learned. But for now, I'm just taking it one day at a time.
I thought marriage was supposed to be a partnership. At least that's what everyone told me. When I first married Eric, I believed them. We met in college. One of those cliché love stories where the jock falls for the shy girl in the back of the class. He had this smile that could light up a room, and I was swept off my feet. We got married right after graduation, full of dreams and plans for the future. But life has a funny way of shaking things up when you least expect it. We were married for 10 years when things started to change. It wasn't sudden. It was like a slow leak in a tire. You don't notice until you're stranded on the side of the road. Eric got promoted at his job, and with that came longer hours. At first I didn't mind. I was busy with my own career as a graphic designer working from home. We still had our weekends together, and we'd make up for lost time. But then, those weekends started to fade away. He'd be too tired, or there was always some work event he had to attend. I found myself alone more often than not. Our conversations turned into quick check-ins between meetings and deadlines. The intimacy we once shared slowly disappeared. It was like living with a stranger, and I started to feel invisible. Then came Sarah. She was his assistant. I knew her from the few office parties I attended. She was young, bright, and always had this energy that seemed to pull people in. I didn't think much of her at first. She was just another colleague, right? But then Eric started mentioning her more often. Sarah said this, or Sarah did that. It was subtle at first, but I noticed. I'm not stupid. One night, after another dinner eaten alone, I finally confronted him. Eric, is there something going on with you and Sarah? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He looked shocked at first, maybe even a little offended. What? No, of course not. She's just a friend, he said, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of hesitation that made my stomach drop. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying our conversation over and over in my head. Was I imagining things? Was I just being paranoid? But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The next day, while Eric was at work, I did something I never thought I'd do. I went through his phone. I hated myself for it, but I had to know. And there it was. Messages between him and Sarah. They weren't overtly romantic, but the tone was too familiar, too personal. I didn't confront him right away. Instead, I decided to wait and see how far this would go. I wanted to catch him in the act, to have undeniable proof. Looking back, I'm not sure why I thought that would make things better. Maybe I wanted to be sure I wasn't crazy. Maybe I wanted to see if he'd come clean on his own. A few weeks later, Eric told me he had to go on a business trip. "It's just for the weekend," he said, kissing me on the forehead like everything was normal. But I knew better. I knew Sarah was going with him. I could feel the betrayal like a knife twisting in my gut. So, I made a plan. I wasn't going to let him get away with this. I booked a flight to the same city he was heading to. I didn't tell him, of course. I wanted to catch him off guard. When I arrived, I checked into a hotel across the street from his. I felt like a spy, heart pounding in my chest as I waited for the right moment. That evening, I watched from my window as Eric and Sarah walked out of the hotel together. They looked so comfortable, laughing and talking like they didn't have a care in the world. It was sickening. I followed them to a restaurant, sitting a few tables away, watching their every move. They didn't notice me. Why would they? They were too wrapped up in each other. I could feel the anger building inside me. How could he do this to me? To us? After everything we'd been through? I wasn't thinking straight. I just wanted to hurt him as much as he was hurting me. So, when they left the restaurant and headed back to the hotel, I followed. I waited until they were inside, and then I knocked on the door. Eric opened it, and the look on his face was priceless. Pure shock. "Kara, what are you doing here?" he stammered, glancing nervously over his shoulder at Sarah, who was sitting on the bed, looking just as stunned. "I think we need to talk," I said, pushing past him into the room. The confrontation was ugly. I let out all the anger and hurt I'd been holding on to for weeks. Eric tried to defend himself, saying it wasn't what it looked like, that nothing had happened yet. But I didn't care. The betrayal was enough. I walked out of that hotel room, leaving him and Sarah in stunned silence. Back home, I filed for divorce the next day. I didn't want to hear his excuses. I didn't want to try and fix something that was already broken beyond repair. Eric tried to apologize, to explain, but it was too late. The trust was gone, and without trust, what's left? The divorce was messy. Eric tried to fight for everything, but in the end, we settled. I kept the house, and he moved out. It's funny how quickly things can change. One minute, you think you're living the perfect life, and the next, everything comes crashing down. It's been a year since the divorce was finalized. I won't lie, it hasn't been easy. There are days when I still feel the weight of it all, like a shadow that I can't quite shake off. But I'm learning to move on. I'm finding myself again piece by piece. As for Eric, I heard he's still with Sarah. I don't care. They deserve each other. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that you can't control what other people do, but you can control how you respond. And I chose to walk away with my dignity intact. I'm stronger now. I've rebuilt my life and I've surrounded myself with people who love and support me. I've learned that I don't need a partner to feel whole. I'm enough, just as I am. So, if you ever find yourself in a situation like mine, remember this. You deserve better. Don't settle for someone who doesn't see your worth. Know when to walk away, and don't look back.